She jumped into the river to save a lion cub. What the herd did next stunned the world. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise that this will be the best story you will hear in your life. Dr. Sophia Winters never took the easy path. Even as a child growing up in rural Montana, she preferred exploring the wilderness to playing with dolls or watching television. Her grandfather's old camera became an extension of her being by the age of 10, capturing the untamed beauty of nature that called to her soul. While other children dreamed of becoming doctors or teachers, Sophia's heart belonged to the wild. "You can't make a living staring at animals all day," her father would say, his weathered face creased with concern. A practical man who worked the same factory job for 30 years, he couldn't understand his daughter's fascination with wildlife. Her mother, though slightly more supportive, harbored similar doubts. "There's no future in it, honey. Be realistic." But Sophia's determination burned brighter than their skepticism. She worked multiple jobs to put herself through college, earning a degree in wildlife biology with honors, followed by a master's, and eventually a doctorate focused on predator behavior in North American ecosystems. Every rejection, every dismissive comment from professors who thought her too idealistic, only strengthened her resolve. By 35, Dr. Sophia Winters had established herself as one of the most respected field researchers at the prestigious Carson Institute for Wildlife Conservation. Her groundbreaking studies on wolfpack dynamics had changed how scientists understood social structures among apex predators. Yet for all her accomplishments, she remained guided by one unbreakable principle: observe, never interfere. "Nature has its own wisdom," she often told her graduate students. "Our job is to witness, to document, not to intervene. The moment we interfere, we compromise the integrity of what we study." That philosophy had sustained her through countless difficult moments in the field, watching injured animals struggle, witnessing the harsh realities of predator and prey, seeing young creatures abandoned. No matter how her heart ached, Sophia maintained her professional distance. The invisible barrier between observer and observed was sacred to her work, to her identity as a scientist. Until that spring morning in Yellowstone National Park, the Carson Institute had sent Sophia to lead a 3-month research expedition studying the reintroduced wolf population. April had brought unusually heavy rainfall, swelling the Lamar River to dangerous levels. Sophia had set up her equipment on a ridge overlooking a section of the river known to be a crossing point for various wildlife. The early morning light filtered through the pines as she adjusted her camera settings. That's when she heard it, a desperate, plaintive cry barely audible above the roaring current. Scanning the churning waters, her heart stopped. A wolf pup, no more than 6 weeks old, was being swept downstream, its tiny head barely visible above the surface. Sophia's mind raced through the possibilities. The pup must have been separated from its pack during a river crossing gone wrong. Without intervention, its fate was sealed. Yet everything she stood for as a scientist screamed against interference. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, even as she set down her equipment. "This goes against everything." But her body was already moving. She secured her camera to record whatever happened next, tore off her jacket, and scrambled down the muddy embankment. The icy water hit her like a physical blow as she waded in, then pushed off into the current. Years of swimming in Montana's lakes and rivers had made Sophia strong. But the Lamar's spring rage tested every muscle. She kept her eyes fixed on the struggling pup, now barely staying afloat. A fallen tree branch raked across her side, tearing her shirt and skin beneath. The pain registered distantly as she pushed forward. "I'm coming," she gasped, though she knew the animal couldn't understand. "Hold on." 20 feet became 10, then 5. The pup's struggles were weakening. With a final desperate lunge, Sophia reached out and caught the scruff of its neck, pulling the small, sodden body against her chest. The tiny creature went limp in her arms, exhausted beyond fear. Getting back to shore proved even harder than reaching the pup. The current pulled relentlessly, dragging them both downstream. Sophia's lungs burned, her legs cramping from the cold. A submerged rock struck her knee with bruising force. For a terrifying moment, she thought they might both perish in the swirling waters. Then her foot found purchase on the riverbed. With renewed determination, she fought her way toward the bank, one agonizing step at a time. When she finally collapsed on the muddy shore, still clutching the wolf pup to her chest, Sophia lay gasping for several minutes. Unable to move, the pup stirred weakly against her, its small body trembling. "We made it," she whispered, checking it for injuries. Besides exhaustion and exposure to the cold, the young wolf seemed remarkably intact. Its dark grey fur was plastered to its tiny frame, making it look even smaller than it was. Sophia's scientific mind began calculating survival probabilities. Without its pack, the pup's chances were virtually zero. It was too young to hunt, too inexperienced to avoid predators. Yellowstone regulations strictly prohibited removing wildlife from the park, yet returning it to the wild in this state seemed equally unconscionable. As she contemplated this impossible dilemma, a sound from the tree line froze her in place. Looking up slowly, Sophia found herself being watched by several pairs of amber eyes. The Lamar Valley pack, the very wolves she had been studying for weeks, had emerged from the forest and now stood observing her with unsettling intelligence. The alpha female stepped forward, her posture alert but not immediately aggressive. Sophia remained absolutely still, cradling the pup while her scientific training and primal instincts waged war within her mind. Everything she knew about wolf behavior suggested she was in grave danger. A human holding a pack member would typically be perceived as a threat. Yet something extraordinary was happening. The wolves didn't charge. They didn't bare their teeth or raise their hackles. They watched with what Sophia could only describe as calculated assessment. With deliberate, painfully slow movements, she placed the pup gently on the ground between herself and the pack. The tiny wolf wobbled uncertainly, then took a few shaky steps toward its family. The alpha female advanced cautiously, sniffed the pup thoroughly, then gently nudged it toward the others. What happened next would forever alter the course of Sophia's life and career. Instead of retreating immediately with the recovered pup, the alpha female turned her penetrating gaze back to Sophia. For several heartbeats, human and wolf locked eyes in a moment of connection that transcended species. Then, with a soft wuff, the alpha turned and led her pack back into the forest, the rescued pup tottering along beside them. Sophia remained frozen on the riverbank, soaking wet, bleeding from several cuts and fundamentally changed. She had broken her cardinal rule of non-interference. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And somehow the wolves had acknowledged her action not with aggression, but with something that felt remarkably like acceptance. As she slowly gathered herself and climbed back to her observation post, Sophia knew nothing would ever be the same. The camera had captured everything: her impulsive rescue, the wolves' unexpected reaction, that moment of cross-species understanding. What she didn't yet realize was how this footage would soon shatter her carefully constructed professional life and ignite a controversy that would echo far beyond the boundaries of Yellowstone National Park. The footage of Sophia's river rescue spread through the scientific community like wildfire. What began as a routine research update to her department head at the Carson Institute quickly escalated into an international controversy. Within days, her inbox overflowed with messages from colleagues around the world, some expressing admiration, but many more condemning her actions as unprofessional and unethical. "You've compromised years of behavioral data," Dr. Marcus Reynolds, her former mentor and the Institute's senior director, said during a tense video call. His disapproval cut deeper than the others. "The Lamar pack's behavior will be forever altered by your intervention. How can we trust any observations of them going forward?" "I made a split-second decision," Sophia defended herself, though doubt gnawed at her certainty. "Was I supposed to watch that pup drown?" "As scientists, yes," Reynolds replied coldly. "Our work depends on objectivity. You've allowed sentiment to corrupt your judgment." The consequences came swiftly. Her research grant was placed under review. Collaborators distanced themselves. A paper she had submitted to the Journal of Wildlife Behavior was rejected with unusually harsh comments about methodological integrity. Sophia found herself increasingly isolated within the very community that had been her home for nearly 2 decades. Yet for every door that closed in academia, another seemed to open elsewhere. The video, leaked by an unknown source within the Institute, resonated with the public in ways Sophia never anticipated. Conservation groups reached out offering support. Local schools requested presentations. Indigenous communities around Yellowstone extended invitations to share her experience with their youth. People connect with your story because it challenges the false separation between humans and nature, explained Grace Running Bear, an environmental educator from the nearby Crow Reservation, who had become one of Sophia's few allies. My people have always understood that observation without responsibility is meaningless. These words echoed in Sophia's mind as she returned to the field 2 weeks after the incident. The Institute had reluctantly allowed her to continue her research, though with reduced funding and the clear understanding that any further interventions would result in immediate termination. The Lamar Valley welcomed her back with its timeless beauty, rolling sage-covered hills. The winding river now receded to normal levels, distant mountains still capped with snow. Sophia set up her observation post at sunrise, her movements automatic after years of practice. Yet something felt profoundly different. The invisible barrier between observer and observed had been irreparably breached. Around mid-morning, the pack appeared at the edge of their usual territory. Sophia tracked them through her telephoto lens, her heart rate accelerating as she counted the members. 8 adults, 3 yearlings, and, her breath caught, 4 pups, including the dark grey one she had pulled from the river. The little survivor was keeping pace with its siblings, seemingly no worse for its ordeal. What happened next defied everything Sophia understood about wolf behavior. The alpha female, distinguishable by her lighter coat and commanding presence, separated from the group and trotted purposefully in Sophia's direction. At about 50 yards, she stopped, sat, and fixed her amber gaze directly on the observation post. "Impossible," Sophia whispered, checking and rechecking her camouflage setup. There was no way the wolf should have detected her presence, yet the alpha sat watching her with unsettling precision. After several minutes, the wolf rose, gave what almost seemed like a deliberate nod, and rejoined her pack. Sophia's hands trembled as she documented the encounter. According to everything she had been taught, what she had just witnessed couldn't happen. Wolves didn't acknowledge human observers from that distance. They didn't maintain eye contact without aggression or fear. And they certainly didn't behave as if they remembered specific humans. Yet the evidence was there in her viewfinder. Something profound had changed in the relationship between this scientist and her subjects. The question was whether that change represented the corruption of data, as Reynolds claimed, or the discovery of something more meaningful. Over the next several days, the pattern continued. The pack would appear, the alpha would briefly acknowledge Sophia's presence from a distance, and then they would go about their business. The rescued pup thrived, growing stronger each day. Sophia documented everything meticulously, though she hesitated to share these observations with the Institute, knowing they would only fuel accusations of compromised objectivity. On the 6th day, a disturbance disrupted the emerging routine. Sophia arrived at her observation post to find someone already there, a tall, broad-shouldered man adjusting photographic equipment with practiced efficiency. "Excuse me," she called out, approaching cautiously. "This is a restricted research area." The man turned, revealing a weathered face framed by dark hair streaked with premature silver. Deep lines around his eyes suggested someone who spent most of his life outdoors. "Dr. Winters," he replied, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't immediately place. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "You have me at a disadvantage," Sophia said, studying him warily. "Jack Blackwood. I guide wildlife photography tours in the park." He extended a hand which she reluctantly shook, "Though I'm not here in that capacity today." "Then why are you in my research zone, Mr. Blackwood?" His expression hardened. "To see for myself the woman who's giving people dangerous ideas about wild predators." The accusations stung. "What are you talking about?" "Your little viral moment." He gestured toward the river. 3 days ago, I had to stop a tourist from trying to approach a grizzly with cubs because, and I quote, "that wolf lady showed animals understand when humans help them." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not what I—" "Intentions don't matter much when people get hurt," he cut her off. "I've spent 15 years guiding in predator country. I've seen what happens when people romanticize wildlife." Something in his tone hinted at personal experience, beyond professional concern. Sophia's scientific curiosity engaged despite her irritation. "You're suggesting my actions were irresponsible." I'm stating it plainly. His dark eyes held hers without wavering. You got lucky with those wolves. But luck isn't a strategy, Doctor. Next time, someone might not be so fortunate. The confrontation might have escalated further had nature not intervened. A series of howls rose from the valley below, the Lamar pack announcing their presence. Both Sophia and Jack turned instinctively toward the sound. Through her binoculars, Sophia spotted the pack emerging from the tree line. As had become their pattern, the alpha female separated slightly, oriented herself toward the observation point, and sat. "What is she doing?" Jack murmured, peering through his own high-powered lens. Sophia hesitated, then decided truth was more important than pride. "She's acknowledging me. She's done it every day since I returned." "That's not possible," he said, but his tone had shifted from confrontational to confused. "Wolves don't—" "I know what the textbooks say," Sophia interrupted. "I wrote some of them, but something changed after the rescue. They see me differently now." For several minutes they watched in silence as the alpha maintained her vigil. Finally, with that same deliberate motion Sophia had come to recognize, the wolf rejoined her pack. Jack lowered his camera slowly. "I've never seen anything like that," he admitted, his hostility tempered by professional curiosity. "But it doesn't change the fact that your video is inspiring dangerous behavior." "That was never my intention," Sophia said quietly. "I'm a scientist, not a social media influencer. Someone at my institute leaked that footage without my permission." Something in her sincerity seemed to reach him. Jack's rigid posture relaxed slightly. "Why did you do it? Break your own rules to save that pup?" The question hit at the heart of what Sophia had been wrestling with for weeks. "Because in that moment, being human mattered more than being a scientist," she finally answered. "And I'm still trying to understand what that means for my work." Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp trill of Sophia's satellite phone. Few people had that number, and fewer still would use it except in emergencies. She answered with growing apprehension. "Dr. Winters," came the clipped voice of Marcus Reynolds' executive assistant. "The director requires your immediate return to the Institute. The board has called an emergency ethics review regarding your conduct in the field." The call ended before Sophia could respond. She lowered the phone slowly, her mind racing through implications. An ethics review could mean anything from a formal reprimand to complete professional excommunication. "Bad news?" Jack asked, studying her expression. "The worst," she replied honestly. "They're convening an ethics panel. My career may be over." To her surprise, his face showed no satisfaction at her predicament. Instead, he seemed troubled. "Because you saved a drowning pup." "Because I violated the prime directive of wildlife research, non-interference." Sophia began packing her equipment with mechanical efficiency. "Because I allowed empathy to override methodology." Jack was quiet for a long moment, watching her work. "You know," he finally said, "I came here today planning to confront the irresponsible academic who was making my job harder. But that's not what I found." Sophia paused, looking up at him questioningly. "What I found," he continued, "was someone wrestling with the same questions I've been asking for years, where the line should be drawn between respect for wild nature and our human capacity for compassion." He reached for his backpack, removing a business card which he handed to her. "When your ethics review is done, call me. There's something you should see, something that might help you make sense of what happened with that wolf pack." Sophia accepted the card warily, unsure whether Jack Blackwood represented yet another complication or an unexpected ally in her increasingly precarious situation. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You clearly disapprove of what I did." Jack shouldered his pack, his expression unreadable. "Let's just say I recognize someone who's had their worldview shattered. Been there myself." He gestured toward the valley where the wolf pack had disappeared into the trees. "Besides, what's happening between you and those wolves? That's not something science can easily explain away." As Sophia finished packing for her return to face institutional judgment, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, like her impulsive leap into the river, represented another moment when life's current was carrying her toward an unknown destination, one where the neat boundaries between observer and observed, between scientific detachment and human connection, no longer applied. The Carson Institute's glass and timber headquarters outside Boulder, Colorado, had always felt like home to Sophia. Today it felt like a courthouse. She walked through the familiar corridors, aware of colleagues' eyes following her, some sympathetic, others judgmental, most simply curious about the researcher, whose viral moment had brought unprecedented attention to their normally low-profile organization. The ethics review took place in the Institute's main conference room, its panoramic windows offering a view of the Rocky Mountains that seemed to mock Sophia's confinement. 5 senior researchers and administrators sat behind a long table, with Marcus Reynolds at the center. His silver hair and patrician features had once represented everything Sophia aspired to in her career. Now his cold gaze felt like the prelude to an execution. "Dr. Winters," he began without preamble, "this panel has reviewed the footage of your intervention with the Lamar Valley Wolf Pack, along with your subsequent field notes and reports. We've also consulted with outside experts on research ethics. Do you have anything to add before we render our decision?" Sophia had prepared a defense, carefully balancing scientific rationale with limited acknowledgement of emotional factors. But facing her peers, the words felt hollow. Instead, she opted for unvarnished truth. "I stand by my actions," she said firmly. "I recognize they diverged from established protocol, but I believe there are moments when our humanity must take precedence over methodology." A murmur ran through the panel. Reynolds's frown deepened. "Science isn't about moments, Dr. Winters. It's about consistent application of rigorous standards. Even at the cost of a life we could easily save?" Sophia challenged. "The natural world experiences countless small tragedies every day," Reynolds countered. "If researchers intervened in each one, we'd have no reliable data, only anecdotes colored by sentiment." Dr. Elena Cortez, the panel's only woman besides Sophia, leaned forward. "Your subsequent observations suggest the pack has altered its behavior toward you specifically. Doesn't this prove Dr. Reynolds' point about compromised data? Or it suggests something we've failed to account for in our understanding of wolf cognition?" Sophia replied. "What if recognition and memory across species lines are more sophisticated than we've acknowledged?" Reynolds dismissed this with a wave. "Anthropomorphism dressed in scientific language is still anthropomorphism, Doctor." For nearly 2 hours, the questioning continued. Sophia defended her observations and interpretations while acknowledging the unorthodox nature of her actions. Throughout, she sensed the outcome had been predetermined. When Reynolds finally asked her to wait outside while they deliberated, the sympathetic glance from Dr. Cortez confirmed her suspicions. In the hallway, Sophia checked her phone, finding a text from Grace Runningbear. "Whatever happens, remember there are many ways to honor your gifts." The simple message steadied her. Perhaps there was life beyond the Institute, beyond the narrow constraints of academic science. The deliberation took less than 30 minutes. Called back into the conference room, Sophia stood before the panel with quiet dignity. "Dr. Sophia Winters," Reynolds began formally, "this panel finds that your actions in the field constituted a serious breach of research protocol and ethical standards. Your continued presence on the Yellowstone wolf study would irreparably compromise its scientific validity." He paused, allowing the judgment to sink in before continuing. "Accordingly, your grant funding is hereby redirected, and your field clearances for the Lamar Valley project are revoked, effective immediately." Though expected, the words still landed like physical blows. 15 years of work gone in a single sentence. "Furthermore," Reynolds continued, his voice softening slightly, "in recognition of your previous contributions to the field, we are offering you a position in our public education department, away from direct research responsibilities." The offer was clear in its subtext, a demotion to a role designing museum displays and educational pamphlets. Their way to keep her quiet and contained while extracting what value remained from her reputation. "I'll need time to consider," Sophia managed, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Of course," Reynolds nodded magnanimously. "Take the weekend. We'll expect your decision by Monday." The drive back to her small cabin on the outskirts of Yellowstone took nearly 7 hours. Sophia welcomed the solitude, the landscape gradually transforming from Colorado's Front Range to Wyoming's high plains, and finally to the forested approaches to the national park. By the time she pulled into her driveway, stars crowded the night sky in a display impossible to see from Boulder's light-polluted campus. She sat on her porch swing until well past midnight, weighing options that all seemed equally unpalatable. Accept the demotion and preserve some connection to her life's work, however diminished. Resign entirely and seek a position at another institution, though Reynolds' influence would likely follow her. Or leave academia altogether, but to do what? As dawn broke over the eastern hills, Sophia's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Dr. Winters, it's Jack Blackwood. Hope I'm not calling too early. The wildlife guide's voice was unexpected, but not unwelcome. I'm awake, she assured him. Been up all night, actually. Bad news at the Institute? The worst, she confirmed. Funding revoked, field clearances cancelled. They offered me a desk job designing brochures. A low whistle came through the speaker. Harsh, what will you do? I honestly don't know. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. Remember I mentioned something you should see. Jack's tone shifted, becoming more serious. That offer still stands. In fact, given your circumstances, the timing might be perfect. Curiosity, Sophia's lifelong companion, stirred despite her exhaustion. What exactly did you want to show me? Better experienced than explained, he replied. Can you meet me at the East Entrance Ranger Station at noon? Bring gear for an overnight hike. Under normal circumstances, Sophia might have demanded more information before agreeing to an expedition with someone she barely knew. But normal had evaporated the moment she'd leapt into the Lamar River. I'll be there, she said. The ranger station bustled with early summer tourists when Sophia arrived. Jack stood apart from the crowd, his tall frame leaning against a weathered jeep. He straightened when he spotted her, offering a nod that acknowledged her presence without unnecessary pleasantries. Ready? He asked as she approached. For what exactly? To see something that challenges everything we think we know about the relationship between humans and wildlife. He opened the passenger door for her. Something that might help explain your experience with the Lamar Pack. The drive took them deep into the park's eastern wilderness, eventually transitioning from paved road to rough track. When even that became impossible, they continued on foot, hiking through pine forest and across alpine meadows bursting with wildflowers. As they walked, Jack finally shared his story. 15 years ago, I was just another ambitious wildlife photographer, he began. Took too many risks for the perfect shot. Got too comfortable around predators. His voice tightened. A female grizzly with cubs surprised me near a stream. I had no spray, no backup. She charged, did exactly what any mother would do when threatened. Sophia listened intently, hearing the echo of trauma beneath his measured words. The attack lasted maybe 30 seconds. Felt like years. She could have finished me easily. But something changed mid-charge. To this day, I can't explain it. She stopped, looked at me with this awareness. Then she huffed, gathered her cubs and left. You survived a bear attack, Sophia stated, connecting this revelation to his earlier hostility toward her wolf rescue. Barely. Spent 6 months recovering. But that's not the point of this story. Jack paused at a ridge overlooking a secluded valley. The point is what happened after, and what's been happening in this valley for the past decade. Below them stretched a hidden meadow ringed by dense forest. As they descended toward it, Jack explained how his near-fatal encounter had led him to this remote location. Guided by rumors among local indigenous elders about a place where the usual rules between humans and wildlife didn't apply. The elders call it the gathering place, he said. They've known about it for generations, but keep it secret from outsiders. After my attack, one of them brought me here to help me understand what had happened to me. The meadow itself seemed ordinary at first glance, wildflowers swaying in the breeze, a small stream cutting through its center, surrounded by the protective embrace of ancient pines. But as they settled at its edge, Sophia noticed subtle signs that marked this place as extraordinary. Game trails converged here from all directions. The plants showed evidence of grazing, yet remained abundant. Most strikingly, she spotted tracks from multiple species overlapping in the soft earth near the stream. Deer beside wolf, elk beside bear, prey and predator sharing the same drinking spot. This doesn't make sense, she whispered, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing. Wait, Jack advised, directing her to a concealed observation blind he had constructed. Sunset is when it happens. As the day's light softened toward evening, animals began to emerge from the surrounding forest. First came deer and elk, moving with unusual calm into the meadow. They grazed peacefully, occasionally drinking from the stream, then defying everything Sophia understood about predator-prey dynamics. A small wolf pack entered from the opposite side. She tensed, expecting the herbivores to flee. Instead, they merely looked up, acknowledged the predator's presence, then returned to grazing, maintaining a respectful distance, but showing none of the panic such an encounter should trigger. "This is impossible," Sophia breathed, her scientific training battling with the evidence before her eyes. "Keep watching," Jack urged. As darkness gathered, more animals joined the improbable assembly. A mother black bear with cubs, a solitary mountain lion keeping to the shadows, but clearly part of the gathering. Smaller creatures, foxes, raccoons, even a porcupine, moved through the space with inexplicable confidence. "What we're seeing," Jack explained softly, "is something the Crow people call Bakshawashi, a neutral ground. A place where, for reasons we don't understand, the usual rules of predation are temporarily suspended. But how? Why?" Sophia's mind raced through possible explanations: unique geomagnetic properties, unknown plant compounds affecting behavior, some complex ecological balance achieved only in this specific location. "Science doesn't have those answers yet," Jack said. "The indigenous communities who've known about these places for thousands of years explain it through spiritual frameworks, sacred spaces where the true relationship between all living things is revealed." As full night descended, the gathering gradually dispersed, each species returning to its territory and resuming its ecological role. Sophia sat in stunned silence, processing implications that threatened to overturn fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior. "This is why I wanted you to see this," Jack said finally. "What happened between you and the Lamar wolves, that connection, that recognition, it exists within a larger context we're only beginning to understand." Under a blanket of stars, they made camp at the meadow's edge. Over a small fire, Jack shared more of what he'd learned in his years studying the gathering place, how he'd partnered quietly with indigenous knowledge keepers to document the phenomenon while respecting their wishes, to keep the location secret from mainstream science that might exploit or dismiss it. "The elders believe there are several such places throughout North America," he explained. "Ancient meeting grounds where animals, and humans who understand how to approach with proper respect, can interact beyond the boundaries of predator and prey." "Why show me?" Sophia asked. "You came to my observation post, ready to condemn me as irresponsible." "What changed?" Jack stared into the fire, considering his answer. "Because when I saw how those wolves responded to you, I recognized something I've only observed here. A kind of recognition across species lines that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "And because you've just lost everything, trying to make sense of an experience that doesn't fit into accepted frameworks. I've been there. I know how isolating that feels." The conversation continued late into the night. Two scientists from different traditions, finding common ground in experiences that had forced them to question their most basic assumptions. By morning, as mist rose from the meadow, something had shifted between them, mutual wariness giving way to cautious alliance. Over breakfast, Jack outlined a proposal that would have seemed outlandish just days earlier. "The Crow Environmental Education Center needs a scientific advisor," he explained. "Someone who can bridge traditional ecological knowledge with Western science. Grace Running Bear mentioned you've been working with them already." "In a limited capacity," Sophia confirmed. "But I'm a researcher, not an educator." "Maybe it's time to be both," Jack suggested. "The center has land, resources, and community support. What it lacks is someone with your credentials and experience." The idea took root in Sophia's imagination. Not a retreat from science, but an evolution. A chance to develop a new framework that honored both rigorous methodology and the kinds of profound cross-species connections she'd witnessed firsthand. As they hiked back toward civilization, a plan began to form between them. The Carson Institute had closed one door, but perhaps another was opening, one that might eventually change how humanity understood its relationship with the wild world. 6 months later, the autumn wind swept golden aspen leaves across the grounds of what was now called the Harmony Point Center for Ecological Understanding. Situated on 50 acres of land, donated by the Crow Nation adjacent to Yellowstone's eastern boundary, the center had transformed from a modest educational outpost into a groundbreaking institution bridging indigenous wisdom and scientific research. Sophia stood on the deck of the newly constructed main building, watching a group of graduate students setting up camera traps along a game trail. The past months had been the most challenging and rewarding of her career. Leaving the security of the Carson Institute had felt like stepping off a cliff, but she'd found solid ground in this unexpected collaboration. The university delegation just arrived, Grace Running Bear announced, joining Sophia at the railing. Now the center's co-director alongside Sophia, Grace had become both colleague and friend, her traditional knowledge complementing Sophia's scientific background in ways that continuously surprised them both. "Are they ready for what we're about to show them?" Sophia asked, adjusting the presentation materials in her hands. Grace smiled. "Are any of us truly ready to have our worldview expanded? They'll resist, then adapt, just as you did." The meeting room filled quickly with representatives from 3 major universities, the National Park Service, and several conservation organizations. Jack Blackwood slipped in last, taking a position at the back wall. His role as the center's field director had brought him to Harmony Point permanently, though he still maintained his guiding business part-time. The evolving partnership between him and Sophia had become the subject of good-natured gossip among staff, but both maintained professional focus on the work that had brought them together. "Thank you all for coming," Sophia began once everyone was seated. "What we're presenting today represents 6 months of documentation at what we're calling neutral zones locations, where interspecies dynamics operate outside conventional ecological understanding. Using carefully selected footage from the gathering place and 2 additional sites they'd identified, Sophia outlined their preliminary findings. The presentation included thermal imaging, audio analysis, and behavioral mapping that demonstrated consistent patterns across all 3 locations. Predator and prey species coexisting temporarily without aggression, exhibiting awareness of boundaries that had no physical markers. Most significantly, she continued, we've documented recognition behaviors between specific animals and human observers that persist over time and across contexts. She played the video from her original wolf rescue, followed by subsequent footage showing the Lamar alpha female's continued acknowledgement of her presence months later. This suggests capacities for memory, recognition, and even a form of cross-species reciprocity that challenges our current understanding of animal cognition, Sophia concluded. The response was immediate and predictably divided. Several younger researchers leaned forward with obvious excitement, while more established figures frowned in skepticism. "Dr. Winters," began Dr. Lawrence Chen from Berkeley's Department of Integrative Biology, "while the footage is certainly compelling, couldn't these neutral zones simply be explained by unique environmental factors? Perhaps geomagnetic anomalies affecting predatory instincts or plant compounds in these specific areas?" "We've considered those explanations," Sophia acknowledged. "Our soil and water analyses show no unusual chemical compositions. Geomagnetic readings fall within normal parameters, yet the behavioral patterns persist." "And what of your wolf interactions?" challenged Dr. Eliza Morton from Cornell. "A single case hardly constitutes a pattern. The alpha's behavior could be territorial warning rather than recognition." Jack stepped forward unexpectedly. "We've documented 17 distinct cases of similar recognition behaviors across 3 predator species, wolves, bears, and mountain lions, all following human interventions similar to Dr. Winters' rescue." He pulled up additional footage on the presentation screen, a bear standing sentinel, while a researcher who had previously removed a painful snare from its paw worked nearby. A mountain lion repeatedly appearing near, but never threatening a wildlife veterinarian who had treated its injured kit. "These aren't isolated incidents," Jack continued. "They represent a pattern our current models can't explain." The discussion grew heated as traditional scientific frameworks collided with evidence that demanded new interpretations. Throughout, Sophia noticed one attendee remaining silent, Dr. Elena Cortez from the Carson Institute Ethics Panel, who had shown her that small gesture of sympathy during her review. As the formal presentation concluded and attendees broke into smaller discussion groups, Dr. Cortez approached Sophia privately. "Marcus Reynolds doesn't know I'm here," she said without preamble. "He's been dismissing your work at Harmony Point as indigenous mysticism dressed up as science." "That sounds like Marcus," Sophia replied dryly. "What he doesn't know," Cortez continued, lowering her voice, "is that the Institute's wolf study has fallen apart since your departure. The Lamar Pack has become virtually impossible to observe effectively. They detect and avoid research teams with unprecedented sophistication." Sophia absorbed this information with mixed emotions. "I'm sorry to hear that. The data from that pack is invaluable, which is why I'm here unofficially," Cortez explained. "I believe your approach might be our only chance to salvage the study. We need to understand this connection you've established." Before Sophia could respond, the center's doors burst open as Marcus Reynolds himself strode in, his face flushed with anger. Conversations halted as heads turned toward the unexpected intrusion. "So this is where you've all disappeared to," he announced, scanning the room until his gaze locked on Dr. Cortez. "Elena, the board will be interested to learn how you've spent your research leave." He turned to the assembled academics. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm surprised to find so many respected institutions represented at what amounts to a pseudo-scientific sideshow." The room tensed. Jack moved protectively toward Sophia, but she placed a restraining hand on his arm. This confrontation had been inevitable since the moment she'd chosen to leave the Institute, rather than accept Reynolds' diminished role for her. "Dr. Reynolds," she acknowledged calmly, "I don't recall sending you an invitation. When 3 major universities suddenly redirect research funds toward a project led by my former protege, I make it my business to investigate," he replied sharply, "especially when that project threatens to undermine decades of rigorous wildlife science with romanticized anecdotes." Grace stepped forward, her dignified presence commanding attention. "Dr. Reynolds, you're on Crow Nation land now. Our protocols for respectful discourse apply here. If you wish to critique our work, you're welcome to review our data and methodology like any other colleague." Reynolds faltered momentarily before regaining his composure. "I've reviewed enough to know that what you're proposing, some mystical connection between humans and wild predators, is dangerous nonsense. That will set conservation biology back 20 years. "Actually," interjected Dr. Chen from Berkeley, surprising everyone, "I came here as a skeptic, but the data Dr. Winters has presented deserves serious consideration. These neutral zones and recognition behaviors represent potentially groundbreaking discoveries about interspecies communication." Other attendees began voicing similar sentiments, creating a chorus of support that clearly caught Reynolds off guard. The scientific community, it seemed, was more open to paradigm challenges than he had anticipated. As the impromptu debate continued, Sophia slipped outside, needing air and perspective. The autumn afternoon had turned golden, casting the surrounding landscape in warm light. She walked to a quiet overlook where the center's property met the wild boundary of Yellowstone. Jack found her there minutes later. "Reynolds is making quite a scene," he reported, joining her at the railing. "But he's losing ground. Too many respected researchers are intrigued by what we've shown them." "It was never about convincing Marcus," Sophia replied. "He represents an approach to science that can't accommodate what we're discovering. This is about the next generation of researchers who aren't bound by those limitations." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. The past 6 months had transformed Sophia's understanding not just of wildlife behavior, but of her own purpose. What had begun as professional catastrophe had evolved into something far more meaningful than her previous work had ever been. "Visitor approaching," Jack said suddenly, nodding toward the path behind them. Sophia turned to find Dr. Cortez walking toward them, her expression troubled but resolved. "Reynolds is leaving," she announced, "along with about 1/3 of your guests. The rest are staying for tomorrow's field demonstration." "Better than I expected," Sophia acknowledged. "There's something else," Cortez continued. Before he left, Reynolds revealed that he's the one who leaked your rescue video originally. What? Sophia and Jack exclaimed simultaneously. Cortez nodded grimly. He claims he did it to discredit you, to show the scientific community how you'd compromised your objectivity. He never anticipated the public would embrace your actions or that other researchers would find your observations valuable. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Reynolds had been her mentor, her academic father figure. His betrayal cut deeper than she'd imagined possible. "Why are you telling us this?" Jack asked suspiciously. "Because I'm resigning from the Institute to join your team here," Cortez replied simply. "If you'll have me, what you're doing represents the future of conservation biology, one that integrates rather than segregates human experience from ecological understanding." As dusk gathered around them, the three returned to the center, where the remaining attendees had organized an impromptu dinner discussion. The atmosphere had transformed from formal academic review to collaborative brainstorming. Ideas flowed freely as traditional scientific approaches merged with indigenous perspectives, creating something new and powerful. Later that night, after the visitors had returned to their accommodations, Sophia found herself once again at the Overlook. A nearly full moon illuminated the landscape, revealing the silhouettes of distant mountains against the star-filled sky. A soft sound drew her attention. At the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a wolf. Not just any wolf, but one with the distinctive lighter coat of the Lamar alpha female. Impossible, Sophia thought. The Lamar Valley was miles from here, well outside this wolf's usual territory. Yet there she stood, regarding Sophia with that same intentional awareness she'd demonstrated after the rescue. After a long moment of mutual recognition, the wolf turned and melted back into the forest, leaving Sophia with a profound sense of connection that transcended scientific explanation. The sound of footsteps announced Jack's arrival. "Everything okay? You've been out here a while." "I just saw the Lamar Alpha," Sophia said, still processing the encounter. "Here, miles from her territory." Instead of questioning or dismissing her claim, Jack simply nodded. "The elders would say she came to acknowledge the new path you're creating, one that honors the true relationship between humans and the wild. Is that what we're doing?" Sophia wondered aloud. "Or are we just scratching the surface of something science has overlooked for centuries?" "Both, probably," Jack replied, his shoulder brushing against hers as they gazed out at the moonlit wilderness. "The most important discoveries happen at boundaries, between ecosystems, between disciplines, between ways of knowing." The next morning brought clear skies and renewed purpose. As Sophia prepared to lead the university delegation to one of the newly documented neutral zones, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. One impulsive leap into a raging river had shattered her carefully constructed professional identity, only to reveal something more authentic beneath the fragments. The Harmony Point Center represented more than a career pivot or scientific breakthrough. It embodied a new approach to understanding humanity's place within the natural world, not as detached observers or dominant controllers, but as conscious participants in a complex web of relationships. As the group gathered for departure, Sophia noticed a familiar figure standing at the trailhead, Grace Running Bear, accompanied by several tribal elders who rarely visited the center. Their presence signaled the importance of this day, this moment of convergence between different knowledge traditions. "Before we begin today's field observation," Grace announced to the assembled researchers, "Elder Joseph Seesfar would like to share something." The elderly man stepped forward, his weathered face reflecting decades of connection to this landscape. "What you will see today," he said in a quiet voice that nonetheless commanded complete attention, "is something my people have known for generations. Places where the usual boundaries between species dissolve, revealing the deeper truth that we are all relations." He looked directly at Sophia. "When this woman saved the wolf child, she did not violate nature's law as some claim. She remembered an older law, that compassion transcends boundaries. The wolf mother recognized this truth. Now others begin to see as well." As Sophia led the group toward the day's observation site, she felt a profound sense of rightness, of alignment between her scientific training and something deeper that had always guided her connection to the natural world. The path ahead would not be easy, Paradigm shifts never were, but it was necessary and true. That evening, as the successful demonstration concluded and the academic delegation prepared to depart with hours of footage and pages of notes, Dr. Chen approached Sophia one final time. "The Carson Institute's loss has become conservation science's gain," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "What you're developing here isn't just a new methodology. It's a new framework for understanding our relationship with the natural world. Berkeley wants to be part of it. Expect formal partnership papers next week." Similar commitments came from representatives of Cornell, the University of Washington, and, surprisingly, the National Park Service itself. In less than a year, Harmony Point had evolved from professional exile to the forefront of a new movement in conservation biology. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Sophia, Jack, and Grace gathered on the center's deck to mark the day's success. The project that had begun with one woman's impulsive act of compassion had grown into something none of them could have imagined, a bridge between scientific rigor and indigenous wisdom, between human consciousness and wild awareness. "To boundaries crossed," Jack proposed, raising his mug in a toast. "And new understandings discovered," Sophia added, touching her mug to his. Grace smiled, completing their circle. "And to remembering what we've always known, deep down, that the separation between humans and nature exists only in our minds, not in reality." As darkness settled over Harmony Point, Sophia reflected on the long journey from that spring morning on the Lamar River. She had lost a career, but found a calling. She had broken a scientific taboo, but helped forge a new synthesis. Most importantly, she had followed her deepest instinct in a crucial moment, proving that sometimes the most profound scientific discoveries begin not with detached observation, but with a simple act of compassion that bridges worlds long divided. From the surrounding forest came the sound of a wolf's howl, lone at first, then joined by others in haunting harmony. The researchers and staff paused in their evening activities, listening to the wild chorus that seemed to affirm their place in this continuing story of interconnection and discovery. Dear listeners, we hope Dr. Sophia Winter's journey from scientific exile to groundbreaking researcher has touched your heart. Her story reminds us that sometimes breaking the rules for compassion's sake can lead to our greatest discoveries. If you've ever felt torn between professional expectations and your deepest instincts, we've created a special playlist of similarly inspiring stories about following your inner compass. Find it by clicking to the left. If this tale of cross-species connection and scientific courage moved you, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the beautiful complexity of life and our relationship with the natural world. What moment in Sophia's journey resonated most with you? We eagerly await your thoughts in the comments below.